There's a particular quiet that some of us are drawn to, a silence that does not feel empty, but full of possibility. It is in this silence that many of us discover our true strength. But this strength is not born of simply being alone. It is born of being with God. A woman who walks alone may seem like an outsider, standing apart from the crowd. But she is not lonely. She has learned the truth of what it means to stand firm when the world around her insists she conform. And she has learned that in this solitude, she is never truly alone. It is easy to look at a woman walking by herself and think she is missing something. Society often measures worth by companionship, by popularity, and by how many people surround us. But what if the greatest strength lies not in the company we keep, but in the one we walk with? God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Psalm 46:5. These words speak to a profound truth, that a woman who walks with God finds the strength to stand firm, even when no one else is around. Welcome to C.S. Lewis. Here, you will discover the path to a deeper and more meaningful relationship with God. For some, walking alone is a choice. For others, it is a circumstance. But no matter the reason, the woman who walks alone discovers that her true strength comes not from the opinions of others, but from a deeper source. She has learned to rely not on the affirmation of friends or the applause of society, but on the quiet assurance of God's presence. In her solitude, she is drawn closer to the one who created her, and it is in this closeness that she discovers the power to face life's challenges. It's tempting to want to fit in, to surround ourselves with people who validate our existence, to live according to the expectations of others. But there is a unique strength in being able to stand alone, in knowing that your worth is not contingent upon the approval of others. A woman who walks alone knows that her value is determined not by society's standards, but by the truth of God's word. Psalm 46:5 speaks not just to the woman who stands alone, but to every believer who has learned that God's presence is the true source of strength. When He is with us, we need not fear. Think of Ruth, who stood alone after her husband died, determined to stay with her mother-in-law, Naomi, even when the future was uncertain. She chose a path of solitude, yet her strength was rooted in her loyalty, her trust in God, and her unwavering belief that God would lead her through. Similarly, a woman who walks alone is not weak or diminished. She is empowered by her independence and her trust in God's guidance. Her strength is not an isolated or selfish thing. It is a strength that allows her to care for others, to stand up for what is right, to make decisions without fear of rejection. In solitude, she gains clarity, and through that clarity, she learns to live authentically without the need to prove herself to others. She understands that true value lies in the knowledge that she is chosen, loved, and sustained by God's grace. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. 1 Peter 2:9 taught it. She knows that her worth is not measured by her relationships, but by the Creator who calls her His own. As she walks alone, she doesn't look to the world for guidance, but to God. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us to trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. A woman who trusts in God's direction knows that He is her most reliable guide. She may not always have clear answers or a roadmap, but she trusts that as long as she is walking with Him, she is walking in the right direction. This is the paradox of the woman who walks alone. In the quiet, she finds companionship. In solitude, she finds strength. In walking alone, she discovers a deeper relationship with God that cannot be found in the noise of the world. And this strength, this peace, is a gift she receives freely, not from the people around her, but from the one who walks with her every step of the way. There is a quiet power in standing firm alone, a power that is not born of pride or isolation, but from a deep understanding of self-reliance. It is not a strength that rejects the need for others, but a strength that recognizes that the true source of one's identity and purpose lies not in the approval of the crowd, but in the presence of God. A woman who walks alone has come to understand that while companionship can bring joy, it is in self-reliance that she finds her true power. We live in a world that emphasizes the need for social connections, for friendships and networks that validate our worth. Yet, in the quiet of solitude, the woman who walks alone finds a clarity that is not possible when the voices of the world surround her. She has learned that her value is not dependent on the number of friends she has, nor the approval of society. Her value is defined by God, and in this truth, she finds a strength that transcends external validation. It is said that solitude breeds strength, and there is truth in this. In solitude, a woman finds the space to reflect, to connect with her inner self, and to hear God's voice in the silence. The world often tells us that we must be constantly surrounded by people, constantly seeking affirmation in order to be fulfilled. The woman who walks alone understands that fulfillment comes from within, from the peace that comes with knowing who she is in Christ. In Psalm 46:5, we are reminded, God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. This verse speaks to the resilience of a woman who, even in her moments of solitude, is never truly alone. Her strength is rooted in the unshakable presence of God within her. She knows that no matter the circumstances, she is held in His love, and this knowledge gives her an unwavering foundation upon which to stand. Self-reliance, however, is not about rejecting relationships altogether. It is about recognizing that her worth is not determined by those relationships, and that her strength comes from God alone. Relationships, when they are rooted in the love of God, are a gift, but they do not define her. She defines herself by the truth of who God says she is. Think of the story of Ruth again, as she walked away from her homeland and chose to stay with Naomi, despite the uncertainties ahead. Ruth's strength was not in the comfort of companionship, but in her loyalty, her trust in God, and her willingness to step into the unknown. Similarly, the woman who walks alone may choose a solitary path, but her strength is not in her isolation. It is in her complete dependence on God. She walks with Him, and in Him, she finds the strength to face whatever comes her way. This self-reliance does not lead to arrogance or pride, but to a quiet confidence. A woman who knows her worth in God does not need to prove herself to anyone. She doesn't seek to please others, because her value is already secured in God's love. She understands that, while relationships can enrich her life, they are not the source of her identity. A woman who walks alone learns to trust her instincts, to listen to the still, small voice of God that speaks in the quiet moments. She understands that self-reliance is not about doing everything on her own, but about recognizing that God is the one who gives her the strength to stand firm. She does not lean on her own understanding, but in all her ways she submits to Him, trusting that He will guide her path. In a world that often values external success, popularity, and the approval of others, a woman who walks alone knows the deeper truth. True success is found in obedience to God. She has learned to set boundaries, to say no when necessary, and to walk away from relationships that do not align with her values. Her peace comes from knowing that her worth is not dependent on the acceptance of others, but on her relationship with God. A woman who knows her worth is free to live authentically. She does not need to fit into the mold that society has created for her. Instead, she lives according to the values that God has placed in her heart. She understands that, while others may try to define her, she is defined by God's love and purpose for her life. Self-reliance is not about being independent in the world's sense of the word. It is about being so rooted in God's love and truth that no matter the circumstances, she stands firm. She is not swayed by the opinions of others, nor does she feel the need to prove herself to anyone. She has already been proven worthy by the one who created her. In her solitude, she has learned the most important lesson of all. She is never truly alone. God is with her, and in His presence she finds the strength to rise above the noise of the world. She is not defined by the opinions of others, but by the truth of who she is in Christ. And this truth gives her a strength that can never be taken away. Resilience is not something we are born with. It is something that is forged over time, through challenges, trials, and moments of solitude. It is in these moments, when we are alone, that we discover our deepest strength. The strength that is not rooted in circumstances, but in our relationship with God. A woman who walks alone is not weak. She is resilient. She is unshakable. Her strength does not come from the support of others, but from an unwavering trust in God's guidance and provision. The world often encourages us to seek comfort in the company of others, to surround ourselves with people who will affirm us and make us feel safe. But a woman who walks alone knows that true safety is found in God's presence, not in the crowd. She has learned that resilience is not about avoiding difficulty or hardship, but about standing firm in the face of adversity, knowing that God is with her. Psalm 46:5 reminds us, God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. This verse speaks to the inner strength of a woman who knows that her foundation is not built on the shifting sands of human approval, but on the unshakable rock of God's love. She knows that no matter how difficult the path may seem, she will not fall because God is with her. Resilience is often misunderstood. It is not about never feeling weak or overwhelmed. It is about being able to rise again, to stand firm, even when everything around us seems to be crumbling. A woman who walks alone is a living testimony to this kind of resilience. She faces each challenge with the knowledge that her strength comes not from her own willpower, but from God's faithfulness. She is able to endure because she trusts in God's promises, not in her own abilities. Think of the story of Esther, who found herself alone in a foreign palace, in a position of power that she never asked for. Yet, in her loneliness and uncertainty, she found the courage to act when her people's lives were at stake. Her resilience was not born of her own strength, but of her trust in God's plan. She understood that her position was not a mistake, but a purpose given to her by God. Similarly, a woman who walks alone understands that every moment, every challenge, and every trial has a purpose. She is not defeated by hardship, because she knows that God is using these moments to shape her into the woman He has called her to be. In her solitude, a woman discovers the depth of her resilience. She is not swayed by the opinions of others or by the circumstances that seem to threaten her. Instead, she draws from the well of strength that God provides, and it is this strength that allows her to endure. She does not look to others for validation or approval, because she knows that her value is not determined by the opinions of people, but by the love of God. It is easy to become discouraged when we feel alone or unsupported. But the woman who walks alone has learned that loneliness is not a sign of weakness. It is an opportunity to lean more deeply into God. It is in the quiet when the world is silent that she hears his voice most clearly. In her solitude, she finds the space to reflect, to grow, and to listen to God's guidance. It is in this place of solitude that her resilience is forged. Consider the story of the prophet Elijah, who found himself alone in the wilderness, running from his enemies. Yet in his solitude, he encountered God in a way that changed his life forever. When everything seemed lost, God spoke to him in a gentle whisper, reminding him that he was not forgotten. Similarly, a woman who walks alone may find herself in moments of doubt or fear, but she knows that she is never truly alone. God is with her, guiding her, strengthening her, and filling her with the resilience to keep moving forward. A woman who knows her worth in God does not allow herself to be defined by the challenges she faces. Instead, she allows those challenges to refine her, to teach her, and to make her stronger. Resilience is not about avoiding difficulty, but about having the strength to face it head-on, knowing that God is with her every step of the way. This resilience is not a passive strength, but an active one. It is the kind of strength that moves forward, even when the way is uncertain. It is the kind of strength that refuses to be overwhelmed, even when the world seems to be against her. A woman who walks alone has learned to trust in God's guidance, and it is this trust that gives her the resilience to face any challenge, knowing that God will help her at the break of day. As she walks her solitary path, she discovers that true strength is not in the absence of fear, but in the ability to trust God, even in the face of fear. She may not always know what the future holds, but she knows that God is already there, preparing the way for her. Her resilience is a reflection of her trust in God's faithfulness, and it is this trust that gives her the strength to stand firm no matter what. There is a courage that comes with walking alone, a courage that is not born from the absence of fear, but from the ability to act despite it. Courage is not the absence of doubt, but the determination to move forward, even when the road is uncertain. A woman who walks alone embodies this courage. She is not afraid to stand apart from the crowd, to make decisions that may seem difficult or unpopular, because she knows that her true strength lies in her ability to follow God's will, no matter where it leads. In a world that places such emphasis on fitting in, it takes great courage to stand out. Society often pressures us to conform, to follow the path that is easiest, to blend in with the crowd. But a woman who walks alone understands that real courage is not about avoiding the discomfort of standing apart. It is about having the strength to stay true to who God has called her to be, even when the world around her tells her to do otherwise. Psalm 46:5 speaks to the heart of this courage. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. These words remind us that when we stand alone, we are never truly alone. God is with us, providing the strength and courage we need to face the challenges ahead. A woman who walks alone does not have to fear the unknown, because she knows that God is already there, guiding her steps and giving her the courage to move forward. Think of the story of Deborah, the prophetess and judge of Israel. Deborah stood alone in a time when women were not typically seen in positions of leadership. Yet, she had the courage to stand firm in her calling, to lead her people to victory, despite the doubts and criticism of others. Her courage was not rooted in her own abilities, but in her unwavering trust in God's plan for her life. Similarly, a woman who walks alone knows that her courage comes not from her own strength, but from the strength that God provides. The courage to stand alone is not a one-time event. It is a daily decision to remain true to one's values and calling, even when it is not the easy path to take. A woman who walks alone must face the reality that she may be misunderstood or criticized for her choices. But she is not swayed by the opinions of others, because she knows that her identity is found in God alone. Consider the story of Mary, the mother of Jesus. When the angel came to her with the news that she would bear the Son of God, she faced not only the uncertainty of this incredible calling, but also the potential judgment and scorn of those around her. Yet, in the face of this overwhelming challenge, Mary responded with courage and faith, saying, "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled." Luke 1:38. Her courage did not come from the approval of others, but from her complete trust in God's plan for her life. Similarly, a woman who walks alone may face ridicule or rejection, but her courage is anchored in her belief that God is in control. She knows that His plan for her life is greater than any opinion or judgment that may come her way. In her solitude, she learns to find strength in the quiet confidence that comes from walking with God. Courage, however, is not about defying the world for the sake of rebellion. It is about having the wisdom to follow God's path, even when it leads down a road that others might not understand. A woman who walks alone does not seek to be different for the sake of being different. She simply seeks to follow God's will, trusting that His path for her is the one that will bring the most peace, the most fulfillment, and the most purpose. In the quiet moments when the world is silent and the voices of others fade into the background, she can hear God's voice more clearly. And in those moments, she is reminded that courage is not about being fearless. It is about trusting God even when fear is present. It is about choosing to move forward in faith, knowing that God will provide the strength needed for each step. A woman who walks alone also learns the importance of setting boundaries, of saying no when necessary, and choosing to guard her peace. The courage to walk alone requires the ability to let go of relationships or situations that are not in alignment with God's purpose for her life. She knows that her worth is not defined by the number of people who surround her, but by the truth of who God says she is. And this knowledge gives her the courage to walk away from what is not meant for her, trusting that God will lead her to what is. Think of Ruth once again, as she chose to walk a path of solitude after the death of her husband. She could have returned to her homeland, to the comfort of her family, but she chose to stay with Naomi, a decision that led her down an uncertain and lonely road. Yet, it was in this very act of courage that God brought about her redemption. Her courage to stand alone, to trust God's guidance, led to the fulfillment of His purpose for her life. A woman who walks alone is not defined by her loneliness. She is defined by her trust in God, her willingness to follow His guidance, and her courage to stand firm in the face of uncertainty. It is this courage that enables her to navigate life's challenges with grace and strength, knowing that no matter where the path leads, she is never truly alone. In a world that thrives on constant connection, where every moment is filled with notifications, emails, and the pressures of social expectations, there is something profoundly sacred about setting boundaries. Boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are gates that protect our hearts, our time, and our relationship with God. For a woman who walks alone, the art of setting boundaries is a gift, one that allows her to protect her peace, preserve her energy, and remain focused on the path God has set before her. Setting boundaries does not mean isolating oneself from others or rejecting relationships altogether. It means understanding the value of self-care and knowing when it is time to say no. A woman who walks alone knows that she cannot pour from an empty cup, and she refuses to give more than she has to offer. Her boundaries are not selfish. They are an act of stewardship, ensuring that her heart and mind remain in a healthy place, anchored in God's truth. Psalm 46:5 tells us, God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. This verse is a reminder that God is our ultimate source of strength, and that we must guard our hearts against anything that would pull us away from Him. A woman who walks alone understands the importance of guarding her inner life. She sets boundaries to protect her relationship with God, knowing that it is from Him that all strength flows. In a world that often tells us we need to be everything to everyone, the woman who walks alone knows that it is okay to say no. She understands that she cannot be all things to all people, and that she is called to prioritize the things that matter most. She says no to distractions, no to unhealthy relationships, and no to anything that would divert her from her God-given purpose. Think of the example of Jesus, who, though he was constantly surrounded by crowds, often withdrew to spend time alone with his Father. In the quiet of those moments, he recharged and recentered himself, ensuring that his actions and decisions were always in line with God's will. Jesus understood the importance of boundaries. He knew that in order to fulfill his mission, he needed to stay connected to the source of his strength. Similarly, a woman who walks alone understands that in order to fulfill her calling, she must set aside time for God and establish boundaries that protect her spiritual health. Setting boundaries requires discernment, the ability to recognize when something is draining us rather than nourishing us. A woman who walks alone has learned to listen to her heart, to discern when something is out of alignment with her values, or when she is being pulled in too many directions. She does not allow the demands of others to dictate her priorities. Instead, she submits to God's will and allows Him to guide her decisions. Consider the story of Martha and Mary in Luke 10:38-42. Martha was busy with all the preparations, trying to meet the expectations of everyone around her, while Mary chose to sit at Jesus' feet and listen to Him. Jesus did not rebuke Martha for serving. He simply reminded her that there was a time to sit and listen. Mary had set a boundary on her time, choosing to prioritize being with Jesus. In the same way, a woman who walks alone knows when it is time to say no to the noise of the world and say yes to being still in God's presence. Boundaries also help a woman who walks alone stay true to her values. In a world that constantly presses us to conform, to fit in, and to please others, it takes great courage to stand firm in one's convictions. A woman who knows her worth in God does not compromise her values to gain the approval of others. She sets boundaries that protect her integrity and her peace of mind. She does not allow the opinions of others to sway her decisions or influence her behavior. A woman who walks alone is not afraid to walk away from relationships that do not honor her values. She understands that true friendship and community are built on mutual respect and shared beliefs. She does not settle for relationships that are draining, manipulative, or toxic. Instead, she seeks out those who encourage her, challenge her, and help her grow in her faith. She understands that her worth is not determined by the number of people in her life, but by the quality of those relationships. In a world that celebrates busyness and productivity, a woman who walks alone understands the importance of rest. She knows that in order to be effective in her work, her relationships, and her calling, she must first take care of herself. Rest is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It is in rest that she finds the space to hear God's voice, to reflect on her life, and to recharge for the journey ahead. Think of the story of Elijah again, who, after facing incredible trials, found himself in a moment of deep despair. Yet in his exhaustion, God provided rest and nourishment for him. God did not chastise Elijah for his weariness. He provided what Elijah needed to continue the journey. Similarly, a woman who walks alone knows that rest is a gift from God. She understands that it is in those quiet moments of rest that she is renewed and strengthened for what lies ahead. The boundaries a woman who walks alone sets are not meant to isolate her from others. They are meant to protect her from anything that would pull her away from God's presence. She knows that when her relationship with God is at the center of her life, everything else falls into place. She is free to walk confidently, knowing that God is guiding her steps and giving her the strength to say no when necessary. In the end, the woman who walks alone is not defined by the absence of others. She is defined by the strength she finds in God, the boundaries she sets to protect her peace, and the courage to remain true to who she is in Christ. It is in this space where she can be still and listen to God that she finds the clarity to move forward with confidence and purpose. There is a trust that comes with walking alone, a trust that goes beyond our understanding, a trust that says, even when I cannot see the path, I believe that you are leading me, Lord. Trust is not something that is built overnight. It is developed over time, through experiences, challenges, and moments of solitude. A woman who walks alone has learned to trust God with every part of her life, the good, the bad, and the uncertain. It is in this trust that she finds her strength, knowing that she does not walk alone, but that God is beside her every step of the way. Trust is often misunderstood. We live in a world that places value on self-reliance and independence. We are told to trust in ourselves, to rely on our own strength, and to make our own way in life. But a woman who walks alone knows that true strength is not found in self-sufficiency, but in complete dependence on God. It is through trusting God that she discovers a strength that is beyond her own capabilities, a strength that empowers her to face any challenge with confidence and peace. Proverbs 3:5-6 encourages us to trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. This verse speaks to the heart of trust, a trust that surrenders our own understanding and embraces God's wisdom. A woman who walks alone trusts in God's direction, even when the path ahead is unclear. She understands that God's perspective is eternal, while hers is limited. And in that trust, she finds peace, knowing that he is guiding her every step. One of the greatest struggles a woman faces when walking alone is the temptation to rely on her own understanding. It is easy to want to control every aspect of our lives, to plan every step, and to make decisions based on our own logic. But God calls us to trust in him, to surrender our plans and our understanding, and to follow him wherever he leads. This kind of trust requires humility. The humility to admit that we don't have all the answers, and that God's wisdom is far greater than our own. The challenge with complete trust in God is that it requires vulnerability. We cannot trust someone we do not know, and so it is essential that we develop a deeper relationship with God. A woman who walks alone has the courage to lean into God's presence, to seek his guidance through prayer, scripture, and quiet reflection. But the downside of this kind of trust is that it can feel uncomfortable, particularly when we are uncertain about where God is leading. It requires patience to wait on his timing and it demands a willingness to let go of our own desires for something better or different. But in that space of vulnerability, something beautiful happens. God fills the void with his peace. A woman who walks alone does not have to know every detail of the journey. She simply has to trust that God is leading her. And as she walks, she discovers that with each step, her faith is strengthened. This trust is not about blind faith, but about knowing that God is faithful and will always provide for her, even when she cannot see the outcome. Think of the story of Mary, the mother of Jesus, who was asked to trust in God's plan, even when she did not fully understand it. Mary was faced with an unimaginable task, to bear the Son of God, yet her response was one of trust. "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled." Luke 1:38. Mary trusted God completely, even when she could not see the full picture. Her trust in God's plan carried her through the challenges she faced, and it was through that trust that she became part of the most significant story in history. Similarly, a woman who walks alone learns to trust God with the unknown. She may not know the full story of her life, but she trusts that God is writing it, and that his story is always better than anything she could plan for herself. Trusting in God is not a one-time decision, but a daily commitment to surrender her plans to him, to follow his leading, and to trust in his wisdom, even when she cannot see the way ahead. The beauty of trust is that it frees us. When we trust God, we are no longer burdened by the weight of trying to control every aspect of our lives. Trust allows us to let go of our fears, our anxieties, and our worries, knowing that God is in control. This freedom does not mean that life will always be easy, or that we will have all the answers, but it means that we can rest in the assurance that God is guiding us with love and grace. However, one potential downside of putting all our trust in God is the fear of what might happen if we are disappointed or feel that God is not answering our prayers in the way we expect. But trust does not mean that we will always understand God's ways or receive everything we want. It means that we trust him to do what is best for us, even when we cannot see or understand the purpose behind our circumstances. Trust is a journey of learning to lean into God's love, knowing that he is always faithful and his plans for us are good. In the end, trust is the key to walking confidently and fearlessly, even when the road is unknown. A woman who walks alone discovers that her strength is not her own. It comes from the deep trust she has in God, knowing that he will lead her, protect her, and guide her toward the life he has planned for her. Trust is what allows her to stand firm, to face challenges with grace, and to move forward in faith, knowing that no matter where the journey takes her, God is always by her side. In the quiet, a woman who walks alone often finds a peace that cannot be found in the clamor of the world. It is a peace that comes not from being in control, but from knowing that God is in control. A peace that is not rooted in the absence of difficulties, but in the presence of God. For the woman who walks alone, solitude is not a burden, but a gift, an opportunity to draw near to God, to reflect on his goodness, and to rest in the assurance that his plans for her are perfect. Solitude, in the world's eyes, is often seen as a weakness. It's misunderstood as loneliness or isolation. Yet, for a woman who understands her worth in God, solitude is a place of strength. It is in the quiet moments that she finds clarity, strength, and direction. It's in the silence that she hears God's voice most clearly, guiding her toward the life he has planned for her. Jesus himself understood the importance of solitude. Time and again he withdrew from the crowds to spend time alone with his Father, seeking strength, clarity, and guidance. In the stillness, he was able to hear from God and to renew his strength. Similarly, a woman who walks alone understands that solitude is not about being disconnected from the world. It is about reconnecting with God. It is in those moments of solitude that she finds the peace that surpasses all understanding. Philippians 4:7 reminds us that the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This peace does not come from external circumstances. It comes from an internal trust in God's goodness and faithfulness. A woman who walks alone is not defined by her circumstances, but by the peace she finds in her relationship with God. She has learned to embrace the quiet moments, to rest in His presence, and to find joy in the solitude that others may fear. Think of the example of Mary, who sat at Jesus' feet and listened to him as Martha busied herself with preparations. Luke 10:38-42. Mary found peace in the presence of Jesus, and Jesus commended her for choosing the better part. In a world that values action and productivity, a woman who walks alone understands that peace is found in stillness. She knows that there is time for work, but there must also be time for rest and reflection. This peace does not come from avoiding challenges or hardships. It is a peace that is tested in the storms of life. A woman who walks alone faces difficulties, but she faces them with the assurance that God is with her. She knows that the trials of life do not define her, but that they are opportunities for her to lean more deeply into God's love and strength. It is in these moments of trial that her peace is strengthened, because she learns to trust God in a deeper way. In the story of Jesus calming the storm, Mark 4:35-41, we see that even when the disciples were terrified, Jesus was at peace. He spoke to the storm, and it was still. This is the peace that a woman who walks alone experiences. It is a peace that can calm the storms of life, a peace that is not shaken by the chaos of the world. It is the peace that comes from knowing that God is sovereign, that He is in control, and that He will always be with us, no matter what we face. The peace found in solitude also brings clarity. A woman who walks alone has the space to reflect on her life, to consider her choices, and to seek God's will. She does not rush through life, but takes the time to listen, to pause, and to reflect on what God is saying. In the quiet, she can hear His guidance more clearly and can move forward with confidence, knowing that she is walking in His will. This peace, however, is not just for the woman who walks alone. It is available to all who seek it. The key is in trusting God, in surrendering our lives to Him, and in embracing the stillness that allows us to hear His voice. A woman who walks alone has learned this secret, that peace comes not from external circumstances, but from an internal relationship with God. It is a peace that transcends understanding and guards her heart and mind. At the end of her journey, the woman who walks alone has discovered something profound, that true peace, true strength, and true purpose are not found in the opinions of others, the approval of the world, or the busyness of life. They are found in God alone. It is in His presence that she is renewed, in His love that she is empowered, and in His guidance that she finds her way. As she walks alone, she is never truly alone, for God is with her, guiding her, sustaining her, and filling her with a peace that cannot be taken away. And this peace is not just for the woman who walks alone. It is for all who seek it, all who choose to walk with God, to trust in Him, and to rest in His love. The journey of a woman who walks alone is not one of isolation, but one of strength, trust, and peace. Through solitude she finds clarity and direction, and through trust in God she finds the courage to face life's challenges. Her peace does not come from the absence of difficulty, but from the presence of God in her life. The lessons we can take from this journey are clear. Trust in God's guidance, set healthy boundaries, and embrace the quiet moments that allow us to grow closer to Him. Walking with God is never a lonely path, for He is always with us, leading us to a deeper and more meaningful relationship with Him. If you've been inspired by this story, we invite you to share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. What resonated with you most about the woman who walks alone? We would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the C.S. Lewis channel for more insights into living a life rooted in faith and trust in God.